Today I want to address the question that is on everybody's mind, and that is, why do I look so bad on Zoom? It all has to do with the perception that comes through the lens that you're using to film yourself. And we have a pair of built-in lenses that have our brain accustomed to seeing each other, watching each other. So for example, if you and I were having a chat right now, you would be sitting about where my camera is, and we'd be talking, and we'd feel real comfortable about that. We wouldn't be too close, we wouldn't be too far away. When you're trying to use a little glass dot in your cell phone or your iPad or on your computer or on your webcam, they're trying to get too much into a small area, and therefore it distorts the way you look because the angle is too wide. Now there's an ideal focal length, okay, and the focal length is the distance between the lens and the part that's reading the lens. So in the case of these cameras, it's the distance between the lens, the glass in the lens, and the sensor. Oh, and the same is your eyeball, right? The pupil, right, opens and closes, and you've got a lens on there, and then there's a retina in the back that reads all this stuff. So we're looking for an ideal fixed focal length, or an ideal focal length, and that is probably about 45 to 50, somewhere in there. Because our brain thinks that's natural, thinks that's normal. And when you see someone at that focal length, you actually feel like they look proper, they look right. Their nose isn't too big, you know, all this stuff isn't out of proportion. So let's eliminate all of these little glass dots that we're trying to record through, because it's just not working. It's not working well anyway. I mean, we do it in a pinch, right? When we're having meetings or whatever, that's fine. But if we are going to actually present a message to people, we need to look like we need to look. I was watching 100 Huntley Street this morning, and you know, everybody's trying to do their stuff online, and God bless us, you know, like God anoint us and give us wisdom on how to do this. But there's so many things I learned that are just like, what? For example, you got two people interviewing. That's great to have two people interviewing. They're side by side on a screen, like a box. Like all the news channels are doing that, and everybody. And I'm like, seriously? There's got to be a better way to see each other. When we talk to each other, we don't put our heads side by side and look out somewhere else. We look at each other. And, you know, the same thing with the Zoom screen. You got all these little boxes with all these people, and everyone in the box is different. Every color is different. Every shape and you know, measure of how close they are. And, you know, it's like one of those games the kids play, right? Find two that are the same. There ain't no two the same. They're all weird. So we're going for this focal length, and if we can nail this down, find a lens, okay? That's my challenge to you, is to find a lens that will give you a natural focal length of, say, 50, 47, 48, somewhere in there. Now, the challenge comes again because we've got different kinds of equipment. If you've got a big Canon or a big Sony camera, the newer ones, well, even the older ones, you can have a full-size CMOS sensor in there. And that is what we are going to go from, because it's a bounce off of the old 35mm cameras. There you've got an option to buy a $7,000 or $8,000 camera and a lens that goes with it that's going to be at least $1,000 just for one lens, okay? And that will give you a 50mm focal length if you buy a 50mm lens, right? Makes sense, doesn't it? Doesn't work that way with devices, okay? It doesn't work that way with your phone. It doesn't work that way with these small cameras, okay? So this camera has a smaller sensor in the back. And this sensor, well, let me say it like this. The sensor on a full-size camera is 1.6 times larger than the sensor on this little camera, which many of our cameras are, this crop sensor, they call it. And you know, pretty well is good. You're going to get a bit more quality with the bigger ones, but when we're doing video and streaming it online, nobody's going to be able to tell the difference between this one and a $10,000 camera, I promise you, unless you got a real good eye. So then when you get a 50mm lens on this camera, which I'm actually shooting through right now, is a 50mm lens from a bigger camera that I've adapted and put on my little M50. I got one in my hand and one over there. And So it's actually shooting me at 1.6 times 50 millimeters. So my actual focal length on this camera that you're looking at right now is 80 millimeters. Okay, it's too high, and I've got the camera too far back. But the reason I wanted to do that is because I want to have this lens in my hand. This is my sweetheart lens, because I want to show you what it is and how it works. So on the crop sensor camera then, this lens here is a Sigma 30 millimeter. So now if I take 30 millimeters and multiply it by 1.6, I get 45, right? 48. And there I am right in the right range, the natural looking range. So when I use this lens, which is all the stuff I produce, I'm looking through this lens, you're seeing me through this lens. And it's the sweet spot. It's right in there in the right place, the 48 millimeter focal length, okay? So what we're looking for is an equivalent of somewhere in there, 45 to 50 millimeters. So this is an equivalent, okay? You put this on a smaller camera and you've got an equivalent of 48 millimeters. So that's what you're going for. You're going for an equivalent of, say, 45 to 50 millimeters. Now you can think about buying a camera to put on the other end of that sweet lens you're going to get, okay? This Sigma lens was $365, and the camera is, I don't know, $780, $790, and it comes with this crazy little free, little zoom lens, right? Which has a not fixed focal length. It zooms from 15 up to 45, which is typical, right? And if you're using a big camera, the zoom will be somewhere higher than that. All right, so the answer to the question is, if you can find a lens to look at me through that has a fixed focal length equivalent of 50 or 45, somewhere in there, millimeters, and then put a nice camera on the back of it, good enough to shoot, 1080p, or I mean, this one will shoot 4K. They're quite amazing nowadays. They just are really awesome, and that has solved our biggest problem. Now the next little bit of problem is the f-stop of the lens, and this is why a fixed focal length lens is so much better than a zoom lens. This little zoom lens, I could make the same shot with this zoom lens. The background wouldn't look as good. I wouldn't pop. I wouldn't be as bright, and I can't get the same amount of light. This one only goes down to f5 when I'm shooting video. This one goes to 1.4. 1.4 is when you're in the dark and your pupils open up, and a person's pupil, our pupils will actually open up to about 2.1, I think. And then when we're in the bright, they'll close down to about 8 or something, okay? So this one opens up to 1.4 and it'll close down to about 16, better than my eyeball. And when you have that now, what happens is I open it up in a state like this, which I have this 50 millimeter, it's also 1.4, it's opened right up. And that's why the background is not, obtrusive, right? Noisy, it's not bugging you, it's not even noticeable. And part of the reason is because it's out of focus. If I use this lens, do the same shot, the background's in focus. If you use your device and do the same shot, the background will be in focus. In fact, device shots are just weird, and you know that, and it's bugging you, and you want to fix it, and here's how you fix it. You're going to take a little bit of investment, but you're worth it. Just think, get a good lens like this, let the world see you the way you really look. And you think, well, I don't look that good. It's not the point. We want to see you the way you are, because we don't want to be weirded out by something that's distracting us from the message that you have to bring, okay? And then you put a nice camera on the back, and you've got a tripod to set it on. Tell you what, guys, we are going this way because we are not going to be satisfied with the status quo, because it's very low. Right now the standard has been set, the bar has been set so low when it comes to producing media online. We have an amazing opportunity to come up with something, I tell you what, better than any television station is doing right now. And we'll get into some of the ways to do that. It's really not difficult. You probably already know how to do it. I think I know how to do it, and you'd wonder why people aren't doing it. So start with the lens. This is the eyeball through which we see you.